Hey guys, welcome back to RPO Restorations. In today's video, we're going to be talking about an emissions control system that disappeared from the cars we buy over 30 years ago. That's right, we're going to be talking about the air injection reaction system, air pump or smog pump, whatever you want to call it. So if you want to clear up some of the myths that are floating around on the internet, learn exactly what these things do and how they work, well then stay tuned, we'll jump right in. Now the air injection reaction system, smog pump, air pump, whatever you want to call it, its role in the automobile's emission system kind of evolved over time. They started to appear in the late 1960s, about 1968, on California emissions equipped cars. About 5 years later, especially by the early 70s, they were on all federal emissions cars. Now, their role in what they did kind of evolved over time, or I shouldn't say evolved, but actually expanded. And before I get into that, let's talk about the component that they're kind of intertwined with, and that is the catalytic converter. Now, some of you may know that the catalytic converter first appeared on passenger cars and light trucks in 1975. Initially, these were called two-way converters. They were the thinner, flatter pancake type filled with pellets. They were called two-way converters because they really dealt with two types of emissions, carbon monoxide and unburned hydrocarbons. Carbon monoxide obviously is a poisonous gas that is created during the combustion process, and unburned hydrocarbons are actually a little bit of unburned fuel that isn't fully combusted during the combustion process inside the motor. So what these two-way converters did was they converted that to things that were less harmless. Now, as things evolved and as technology went on in the 1980s, these were changed to three-way converters. So in addition to what the two-way controlled, they also dealt with oxides of nitrogen, which are another harmful gas that's emitted during the combustion process of the engine. Now, catalytic converters only do their job or work well when you have two things present. One is that 14.7 to 1 air-fuel mixture that they run best on. Once the mixture gets a little too rich, they don't work as well. Another thing is temperature. Catalytic converters, obviously, if you've ever been under a car that's running, get very hot. They need to reach a very high temperature in order to act efficiently. So, the catalytic converter system is actually intertwined with the air pump. One of the air pump's main goals or purposes is to keep the catalytic converter at that optimal temperature. Now, it also has other things that it does, and we're going to get into that right now. I'm going to break down the components involved and how they interact with one another. So before we explain the roles and exactly how the system works, let's talk about some of the components involved. And this system is very simple. The air injection reaction system really only consists of 3, and if you really want to get technical, 4 parts. Part number 1 is the actual air pump itself. Now, one myth that I've heard on the internet is that this is a horsepower robber. You have to get rid of it in order to improve horsepower. Well, the air pump takes exactly 1 horsepower to run, so no big gain there. I just wanted to dispel that myth. I'm not going any further down that road of whether you should keep it or get rid of it. The second component that the system is made up of is the diverter valve, or depending on your car, it may be a series of diverter valves all slapped together. GM used different valves for different cars, for different engines, for different times of the year. It's really difficult for me to keep track, especially with the parts catalogs and things like that, of what valve specifically goes in every car. They use so many. They change valves midway through production runs. It's really complicated. So just assume that whatever you have in your car probably belongs there, because who's going to change a diverter valve to something that doesn't work? Chances are very slim. But all the diverter valve does is divert air to different locations under the hood via the third component, the piping. The piping goes usually 1 or 2 places depending on the year of your car. It will definitely run somewhere right between the exhaust manifold and exhaust valve. and it will usually run to the catalytic converter itself. There's also a third place that the air will run to, and that is your air cleaner. And this function we'll talk about in a little bit. And the fourth component, if you want to get really technical about it, is the ECM itself, because on later 81 and newer computer command control system equipped cars, these systems are run by the computer. So that's it. It's a very simple system. The pump, the valve, the pipes. That's it. So now that we've explained the components involved and what some of the main goals of the system are, let's talk about how it works. Now, you start the car, air is usually diverted through the hose to the air cleaner. That's because it takes the system a couple of seconds to wake up and it needs to know what it's doing. But understand this going in. If your car is hot and running at normal operating temperature and idling, and you feel a lot of air coming out of that hose, just know that your system isn't working right, because that's not where it's supposed to be going. So that's one of the main indicators that something is wrong with the air injection reaction system. It by default will send air to the air cleaner if something's not right. Okay, so there are two main modes that this operates in. First mode is it will divert air to that exhaust manifold, or somewhere in between the exhaust valves and the manifold, in order to affect those unburned hydrocarbons that are created during the, or actually, I shouldn't say created, are not dealt with during the combustion process. Now, the way that an internal combustion engine works is you suck in air and fuel, the cylinder compresses it, spark plug fires, and it burns. However, it burns oxygen faster than it does fuel. Now, as you might know, there are three things required to create fire or a burning process, and that is fuel, a spark, and oxygen. So inside that cylinder, we have fuel, we have oxygen from the air that's sucked in through the air cleaner, and we have a spark from the spark plug. However, these internal combustion engines are not that efficient, and they burn the oxygen off faster than they can deal with the fuel. So what you end up with is a tiny little bit of fuel that's not burned during the combustion process. Those are those unburned hydrocarbons that the catalytic converter has to deal with. Now, starting at about 68 or so on the California cars, and later on in the early 70s with everybody else, they installed an air pump. So the first or primary function of those initial air pumps was to introduce a little bit of oxygen to that exhaust stream as that exhaust came out of the valve and into the manifold, in order to restart the combustion process and burn off the rest of those hydrocarbons. Now, as things evolved and we got catalytic converters, the catalytic converter does the job of that as well. But that was the initial and primary goal of the smog pump or the air pump system, to deal with that tiny, tiny, tiny little bit of unburned fuel and burn it off and keep it out of the air. Now, as catalytic converters rolled out, we know that they need to be hot in order to work right and be efficient. So they installed another pipe and that diverter valve. So air is actually diverted to the catalytic converter sometimes in order to create a little bit of heat and a tiny little bit of combustion in there and keep the converter hot. This way it runs more efficiently. That's it. Those are the two functions of the air injection reaction system or smog pump. Either to deal with those unburned hydrocarbons, especially when the engine first starts and it's very rich. Then during idle or extended sitting in traffic, air is diverted to the catalytic converter to keep it warm, because you don't have enough exhaust flowing through it to keep it at its optimal temperature. Now, there are certain times during driving, especially when you're accelerating hard and then you take your foot off the gas, that you create a momentarily rich condition. Introducing oxygen into that exhaust stream may create a backfire. So they added a third function to that diverter valve. And during those times, when you quickly take your foot off the gas, it will divert air back here to the air cleaner in order to prevent a backfire. That's it. Those are the three things that your air pump does, or the three places that it sends air while you're driving your car. And now to address the last issue with the air injection reaction system. And that is, do I really need it? Well, short answer, but today's catalytic converters, or the age of these cars and whether you actually have to pass emissions type inspections or not, the answer is probably no. You really don't. It's your car, do what you want with it. But my 2 cents is, when I'm looking for a car, I like my car's bone stock. The value of these things are climbing. So you may want to keep it all original for that way, or for that sake. But again, it's your car, do whatever you want with it. So that's it, guys. Just a quick little primer on what the air injection reaction system does, what its functions are, what its parts are, and how the system actually works, or what it's supposed to do. I hope you were able to learn something today. Thank you for tuning in, guys. I'll see you next time.